Come on, baby, it's alright. It's not gonna bite you.
Taking things back to the origins of this series, and we'll see that it started off in quite a gruesome place. Hard to watch, disturbing movies that aptly gave birth to the name of the series, Brutality Of. While I've dabbled with other styles of horror movies since, I still have the calling to return to the older style of covering the movies that you definitely not want to watch with your parents in the room, or anyone in the room for that matter. So that's why today we'll be looking at Dead Girl, a somewhat unsuspecting movie from 2008 that right away gives off the vibes of cheesy direct-to-DVD quality, but if you manage to stick with it, you'd be pretty surprised at what it's got lying in wait. But you'd also be pretty surprised with what's about to come next. Today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. I got you again. Explore millions of champion combinations and master countless tactics as you take on the raid bosses, dungeon runs, campaign battles, and PvP arena matches, all from the comfort of your mobile or desktop device. Raid suits me perfectly due to its easy to pick up and go nature, whether I be taking a break from work, making a coffee, or just sitting back to relax, which is actually one of my top 3 things about Raid: the easy to pick up and go aspect of it, grinding out my characters for that satisfaction, and the plethora of champions right at your fingertips. There's a ton happening in Raid this month. They've got special events every single day, including an entirely new event for the summer solstice, the Path of Light. You'll be able to explore 3 branching paths to get the rewards you want the most, and on top of that, there's some awesome new champions coming out and a set of skins for the amazing Trunda Guilt Mullet. They're currently running a special Deliana Chase event, where all new and existing players can get a brand new legendary champion from the High Elves faction. All you have to do is log in and play Raid for 7 days, between now and July the 20th, and you'll get Deliana for free. For all new players, once you're in game, just enter promo code MYDELIANA to get 50 XP brews to max your legendary hero Deliana to level 50, as well as a ton of silver. The promo code is available from May 23rd to July 20th. And if you use my link or scan the QR code on screen right now, new players will get a free starter pack worth almost $30 to kickstart your game. A free champion Aina, 200k silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in game. You'll find your rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. The movie begins by introducing us to 2 friends skipping school, Ricky and JT. It's a boiling hot day, and with the pair of teens not knowing what to do, and also being a pair of male teens, decide to break into an abandoned mental hospital, drink some beers, and trash the place. Good wholesome teenage boy fun. They head down to an underground section of the hospital, tunnels that connect all of the buildings together so that dangerous patients would never be exposed to the outside world. But while they're down there, a wild dog appears and begins chasing the duo. After climbing their way up and into an old tunnel to escape, and with neither of them particularly fond of the idea of getting mauled to death by a rabid dog, they're forced to carry on going, and eventually come across an old rusted shut door that seemingly hasn't been open in years. After forcing their way inside, their little trespassing and vandalizing fun day out is about to take a turn. They discover what they believe to be the corpse of a naked woman tied up and covered with a tarp. Because of course she'd be dead. Clearly no one has been in this room long enough for the door to rush shut, and there's no other entries or exits either. But suspiciously, she isn't in the state that you'd expect for a multi-year-old corpse to be in, and when JT reaches out to touch her, she suddenly breathes. Somehow this woman is alive, and it looks as if she's been deliberately placed here. And with the knowledge of that freaking Ricky out, with him wanting to leave to get help before whoever put her here comes back. But JT's whole demeanor changes, and he plainly says, "We could keep her." Ricky, rightfully confused about this, attempts to stop JT from inappropriately touching her, but he suddenly swings around and punches him in the face. It's like a switch has been flipped in his head, almost like a bear protective over its kill, with Ricky wanting absolutely nothing to do with this, and with JT clearly having no intentions of leaving. Ricky turns around and leaves the alive, restrained, helpless woman with JT, who's obviously got bad intentions in mind. That night, Ricky's about to call the police to report it, but as he's about to, he's interrupted by his mother's drunk boyfriend, and he storms off in a rage. Without making an attempt to use the phone again later, Ricky starts shooting a gun under a bridge, because I guess that's just the thing teenage boys get up to these days, where he's then approached by JT. Despite Despite Ricky wanting absolutely nothing to do with it, JT manages to get him to come back by telling him that there's something that he really needs to see. Don't tell me it's a naked captive woman, that would be wild. When they get back to the basement room, JT tells Ricky that when he was violating her, she woke up and tried to bite him, so he responded by hitting her. But he liked the feeling of punching her, so he continued to beat her until she stopped moving. Ricky pushes past him to see what he's done to this poor woman, but JT pulls out his gun and without hesitation fires off multiple shots into the woman. Ricky passes out due to the shock of watching his friend murder someone, but when he comes to, the woman is still alive. JT brought him here to show him that she can't die, because as well as beating her, he also strangled her until he felt her neck snap, but moments later she woke right back up. Ricky, clearly very torn about this whole situation, wants to just call the authorities and get it over with, but JT begins to manipulate him into keeping him quiet. Ricky doesn't actually want to abuse the woman like JT does, but for some reason he's still going to keep his mouth shut about it. And after school the next day, Ricky's fantasizing about Joanne, his high school crush, when suddenly he sees flashes of the captive woman. Feeling guilty and knowing that it's not right, he decides to go and free her. But when he arrives, not only does he find JT there, but also Wheeler, their friend from school, who's currently in the middle of violating her. And despite his efforts to get the guys to stop with this, he's once again talked into not helping and turns around to leave the pair with the woman. Later that night, he returns armed with bolt cutters and tells the woman that everything is going to be alright because he's going to get her out of here, followed by the woman touching his hand almost as a non-verbal scream for help. He frees one of her hands, but is quickly distracted by the sound of someone else in the building with him, which causes the woman to violently grab onto his arm, forcing Ricky to pry her fingers away. The other people are JT and Wheeler, and Ricky is forced to hide and watch as JT jumps up onto the bed and begins to unbuckle his trousers, when suddenly, the woman hits him across the face and attempts to break free. During the commotion, the pair manage to restrain the unkillable woman, which gives Ricky the perfect opportunity to slip out. JT and Wheeler are forced to lock themselves in the room as the rabid wild dog has returned and he's hungry for sex offenders. The next day, with JT's pecker presumably looking like salami at this point, Wheeler walks in as he's violating the woman and the pair begin to casually joke about the horrific things that they're doing to her as if this doesn't bother them in the slightest, with Wheeler's biggest concern being how she got here in the first place, closely followed by the disgusting smell caused by JT spending the entire night here because once again, salami pecker. The bullet wounds have begun to fester and seep with pus, which seems to excite JT rather than disturb him, as once again he cracks a joke to Wheeler, but this time about using the bullet holes to violate her, in a way that leads me to believe that he isn't actually entirely joking. Back at school, Ricky's alone due to his only two friends suffering from this little condition known as psychotic sex offender, and he's approached by Joanne, and the pair get to talking about her being Ricky's first kiss when he was 12. He's very clearly still into her and decides to ask her out, but she rejects him, and after wallowing in that for a bit, he meets up with Wheeler after school when the pair are suddenly attacked by Joanne's boyfriend, Johnny, and his friend Dwyer. Wheeler tries to step in a few times, which only results in him receiving a vicious beating as well as Ricky. And once the jocks are done beating them up and go to walk away, Wheeler can't help but open his mouth and scream out that they don't need their cheerleader girlfriends anyway because they've got a sex slave of their own, which results in the pair being forced into the trunk of a car in broad daylight and driven to the abandoned hospital because, for some reason, Johnny and Dwyer know exactly where to go despite never actually being told, which I guess isn't actually too much of a stretch, considering if there was a creepy weirdo keeping a woman tied up in a basement somewhere, the abandoned mental hospital might be the spot for it. Ricky, realizing that he can't let them find out about the woman, turns around and decides to take a beating instead, and a beating he takes, but when he wakes up, Wheeler's taken them to her anyway, because not only can he not keep his genitals in his pants, but he can't keep his words in his mouth.
I'm sorry.
They all enter to find JT sat in the room and smoking a cigarette, and it's awfully clear that he's not left in a long time. He doesn't seem upset or worried about them finding out. In fact, he actually tells them that they can use her if they like. Johnny is hesitant at first, as he's anxious and uncomfortable about the situation, because, well, yeah. But after he tells Ricky that he doesn't need to, taunting him, saying that he's got a hot girl waiting for him at home anyway, Ricky decides to respond by mocking him and pressuring him into using her mouth, knowing full well what would happen if he did. Not only Ricky, but JT and Wheeler knowing too, both just stand there, casually waiting, and because he doesn't want to back down and look weak in front of them, he agrees too, because I guess everyone in this movie is an evil psycho, and exactly what you think will happen, happens. He repeatedly punches her in the face to get her off, and as the pair say they're going to call the police, JT reminds them that what they've just done wasn't consensual, and that the battered and beaten face of the woman is going to make it a little bit hard for them to talk their way out of. The next day, JT starts applying makeup to the badly bruised and swollen face of the woman, when all of a sudden, the dog enters the room, because I guess no one had thought to do anything about the feral angry dog constantly trying to eat them. That is, everyone except the woman. As when the dog jumps up onto the bed, she violently bites into it, tearing it to pieces with nothing but her mouth, which leaves me with very little hope for whatever Johnny's got left going on down there. And the next day, while in class, Ricky turns around to see Johnny clearly not looking very well, followed by him sprinting off to the bathroom where he notices a large bruise on his chest, and when he stands up, blood suddenly shoots out of his behind and his insides fall out, because dude really did just shit his guts out. Dwyer returns to the woman with the intention of taking her to the hospital in hopes of finding out what's wrong with Johnny, but is confronted by JT. Dwyer tells JT what happened to Johnny and that he's now started to smell like the girl, causing JT to realize that it was the bite that's done this to Johnny and that he's turning into whatever she is, meaning that he has the power to turn whoever he wants. But before Dwyer can do anything about it, the woman suddenly leaps up to bite a chunk out of his chest, followed by JT grabbing him, where apparently he does a magic trick to make him disappear into thin air, because this is the last time that he'll ever be seen or mentioned for the rest of the movie. Wheeler, almost as deranged as JT, has accompanied him on a new mission to kidnap a new victim to use them as a slave. But whereas they think it's going to be an easy thing to do, they quickly discover that for them, it's actually quite the opposite. They convince a woman to come over to their car and hit her over the back of the head with a tire iron, but instead of collapsing, she simply turns around, confused about what's just transpired, with blood dripping down her face, before she punches Wheeler and tackles JT to the ground. And as Wheeler runs at her one more time, she knocks him to the ground once again and steals his wallet. Once they get back into the car, unsure about what their plan is now, Joanne, Ricky's crush, angrily approaches the pair, demanding to know what they did to Johnny. So JT says that he'll show her instead of tell. Ricky's finally decided that enough is enough, and knowing that he can't free the woman, decides to take a machete to cut her up to end her suffering. But as he's about to do it, he realizes that Joanne is being held captive there too, and as he starts to free her, JT and Wheeler enter the room. They attempt to convince him that this is all for the best. They've done this for him because this is what he wants. JT tells him that the world has it out for people like them, but down here in the dark, they're in control. As he's doing so, Wheeler begins to touch Joanne as an increasingly agitated Ricky, wielding a machete, repeatedly tells him to stop. Even JT thinks that it's not a smart idea for him to do it, but after several warnings, Ricky slices off his friend's hand with a machete and watches him collapse to the floor. As JT is telling Ricky that he'd never have a chance with Joanne in the real world, we see Joanne beginning to untie the woman's hands from behind, followed by the woman pouncing onto Wheeler as she begins to eat him, giving Ricky and Joanne the chance to make a run for it, leaving JT behind to mercy kill Wheeler, because I guess he just doesn't like the idea of having an immortal undead best friend. As they're stuck at the top of the stairwell, unable to get through the door, the woman suddenly appears, but is dragged back into the other room by JT, and as soon as Ricky turns his back to find another exit, Joanne leaves. Ricky exits the stairwell to see the woman biting into JT, and as she turns around, growling with blood dripping from her face, almost certainly going to kill Ricky next, she sprints right for him, but knocks him to the ground and runs straight up the stairs, breaking through the door as she goes. Ricky is the only one who never abused her, and perhaps that time she touched his hand instead of grabbing it was her way of telling him that she wouldn't hurt him. He turns to see Joanne, but something isn't right. JT stabbed her in the back with a machete because he's really got woman issues, and JT, with his upper lip bitten off and covered in blood, is only concerned about one thing: for Ricky to please not tell his grandma what he's done. But he also tells him that it's not too late, and he could bite her before it is. After it then cuts to see the woman sprinting off into the darkness of night, we then see Ricky alone at school, with everything seemingly going back to normal, surprisingly with a smile on his face, which is unusual for him. But then we see Joanne tied up in the basement, as JT really did bite her and she's changed. But the unsettling part about it is, why is he smiling? Because Joanne isn't dead and can now live forever? Or because he now has access to her to continue the horrific cycle started by JT with the undead woman? Before we bring this to an end, I just want to let you guys know that I've got a Twitter. If you want to stay up to date with future projects and things, there'll be new things coming soon. And also, I'd like to give a big shout out to all of my patrons. A big thank you to Dom, Hunters263, Rebecca Pitts, A Dandy in Space, Martin Brannan, Natasha Twyman, Jared C. Bees, Pascal Mathis, Fighting the Pirates, Richard McGowan III, Macy J, Reese Harford, Horatio, Raimi Patterson, Chris, Michelle, Newcomb, Dennis, Wade Knott, Ashley L. Wint, Christopher Butsky, Joshua Torres, Billy Kyle, Remy, Fire Goes Fast, Josh Brooks, Ash Kamihara, Robert, Adam W, and Dark Shiva. So once again, a big thank you to the patrons, and thank you to everyone else for watching.